I've been serving God in vocational ministry for more than 20 years. And that doesn't include some of my time as a youth leader, just kind of volunteering, teaching Sunday school. And it's been a rich 20 years. I had so many conversations over coffee, or actually I don't drink coffee, so hot chocolate or a Coke or a donut. McDonald's conversations. Remember when they used to have those chairs that kind of went in like that because they wanted you to eat and get done with your meal? I remember those youth conversations where we're pressed uncomfortably close to each other, sitting in the foyer, sacked against a wall with kids that were working through issues. I remember lunches and meetings, and if you boil all of it down, and you put the heart cry of all of those people together, and you boil it down into one essential question, I would say that it's this: God, what do you want me to do with my life? Young and old. Remember when you were young? It was so clear. Well, I'm going to be a fireman, right? I'm going to be a fireman. And then there's artists, hockey players. In fact, the firemen usually will also want to be artists and hockey players, right? And they've got it worked out in their minds. I'm going to be all three. Or the princess zookeepers in our home. That's what it was. I'm going to be a princess. I'm going to be a zookeeper. I'm going to be an artist. Don't worry, Dad. It's going to work out. Over time, the firemen are replaced by accountants. And the artists are replaced by administrators. The hockey players become managers. The zookeepers become sales associates. And the princesses become shopaholics. We grow up, right? We grow up. Reality check. All these dreams we had of changing the world or making our mark kind of come crashing into reality, and we've got to face the facts about our lives. But somewhere along the line, a very dastardly trade occurs. It's this: we trade our God-given desire to make a difference with the reality of just making a living. And then we spend the next 20 years justifying the trade. Well, there's bills to pay, and there are. And there's work to be done, and there is. And there's kids to raise, and that's true. But through all the justifying, even though we can convince maybe ourselves, on the outside at least, we can convince our spouse if we have one, we can convince our parents we've made something of our lives, create, the church community we can convince. Deep down, our souls know that we've sold out. Our souls know that we've traded making a difference for making a living, and there's something missing. I know this because we can only keep that sense of betraying ourselves down and buried for so long. It comes up at midlife. It raises its head again, and we start to ask those questions. What have I done with my life? Is it enough? Where am I going? How do I want to spend the second half of my life? This question does not go away just because the dream of being a fireman is no more. Some of us actually became firemen, I think, which is awesome. You got to do what you wanted to do since you're a kid. That's awesome. But we're created to make a difference, aren't we? We're created to make a difference. And as we're talking about this Christmas is our commissioning season. Christmas isn't about just God giving Jesus to me. It's about God giving Jesus to the world through me. I receive Jesus so that I can share Jesus with the world. The gift that keeps on giving, because it's not just a gift, something tangible. It's not a thing. He's a person. The most powerful force in the universe, the most loving being in the cosmos. We're sharing him. We've been studying Mary throughout Advent. Mary, this fragile teenager who said yes to the angel Gabriel, and in so doing said yes to God, and learned better than any of us probably ever will what it means to give Jesus to the world. Jesus literally grew in her womb, and she gave birth to the Son of God and then shared him with everybody else. She's the mother, she's the master at this concept. In case you're wondering, 3 or 4 weeks in, whether I'm stretching this too far, the parallels of learning to share Jesus like Mary, let me remind you of a verse written by Paul. Paul says, "My dear children, I'm again in the pains of childbirth." So he himself is understanding that Christ within him is wanting to be given away until what? Until Christ is formed in you. He says this thing that's happening with receiving Jesus and passing him on so that you can receive Jesus and pass him on, it's still going on to this day. And then, of course, there's a verse that some of us know well if you know anything about spiritual gifts. To each one, the manifestation of the Spirit, Christ's Spirit, is given for the common good. Why is that manifestation of Jesus given to us? To give away. I've heard all kinds of definitions of spiritual gifts in books. I've read books about spiritual gifts. I've been to seminars about spiritual gifts. None of them have ever landed on the simple concept that the reason it's a spiritual gift is not that I get something from God, it's that I'm able to give something from God. My gift is to become a gift giver. This is the spirit of Christmas. It's the spirit of Christianity. This is why we come back to the pole. It's why we come back to the manger. It's why we remember this gift that Jesus is. The gift is conceived as we say yes to God. We learned that from Mary. The gift gestates within us, grows within us as we share the journey with others, as we get the support we need so it doesn't just fizzle within us. The hope, the dream, the desire, the idea that God's given us to change the world or make an impact or share something with our neighbors or reach someone for Christ. As we enter community, that sense of dream and of changing the world, of making a difference is nurtured. After the dream starts to take shape as born, it grows as we embrace setbacks as part of the journey, because some of them aren't setbacks at all. They're actually part of the plan. That's what we learned last week and this week. We're going to learn that the gift, whatever Jesus is doing through us, it really takes off when we learn to let go. So we're going to pick up the trail 12 years after the birth. Some things have happened. There's been a murder attempt that they've narrowly escaped because an angel again came to Joseph in a dream and warned them, and they went to Egypt while Herod was busy murdering all the children that might become the Messiah. They've moved around a few times, and then we find them here in the temple. Jesus is 12 years old. Every year, Jesus' parents went to Jerusalem for the Passover, or for the festival of the Passover. When he was 12 years old, they went up to the festival according to the custom. After the festival was over, while his parents were returning home, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem, but they were unaware of it. They were unaware of it because they kind of traveled as family units. Friends, family, big community, right? So Jesus is probably with someone else. The other day, we had our life group Christmas in the gym. There's a whole bunch of people. Kyle and Bria Cridland were there with their newborn. I said, "Do you know where your baby is?" And Kyle says, "No." Right? Maya's being passed around, right? This is probably what's kind of happening with Jesus. He's with somebody. I'm sure he's with Uncle Frank. Right? He's always with Uncle Frank. Uncle Frank always pulls something out of his pocket, and Jesus is fascinated with that. I don't know. But somehow they're thinking he's with us, even though we don't see him. And they realize, oops, he's not with us. Thinking he was in their company, they traveled on for a day. A full day. By the end of the day. Anyone seen Jesus? Talking about one of those moments where you realize you've dropped the ball. Again, God has given you the Son of God to take care of, and we lost him. Is that bad? Does that change the plan, God? Then they began looking for him among their relatives and friends. So maybe they're in the front of the caravan. They're on the way back. They're a day's journey. So now they turn around and they start making their way back to the caravan. Have you seen him? You know, they don't have to use a picture because everyone knows, and they don't have pictures back then. Have you seen Jesus? No? Have you seen Jesus? Jesus. They get to the end of the caravan who's still moving and they think, he's not here. Have you ever done that? In the mall? Lost your child? What do we do next? Where could he be? So they retraced their steps. This is what anyone else would do, right? When they didn't find him, they went back to Jerusalem to look for him. And after 3 days, they found him in the temple courts, sitting among the teachers. Now, I want to point something out here. This is scary. It's really scary. And they're going to learn something profound about Jesus and his mission. Watch this. After 3 days, they found him in the temple court, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. And everyone who heard him was amazed at his understanding and his answers. When his parents saw him, they were astonished. His mother said to him, "Son, why have you treated us like this?" See, we read it in as though she's being real spiritual. But what do you do when you find your kid in the mall, in the candy store, and you moved on? "What are you doing? We were worried sick about you." This is a Jewish woman, not a Mennonite mother. Even Mennonite mothers lose it. He is in trouble. "Your father and I have been anxiously searching for you. What do you have to say for yourself?" Right? "Why were you searching for me?" he asked. Didn't you know I had to be in my Father's house?" But they did not understand what he was saying to them. Then he went down to Nazareth with them and was obedient to them. But his mother wrestled with all of these things in her heart. And Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and with man. The moment God conceives something and then gives birth to something in our lives, a God thing, whatever it is, whether it's that idea for a new ministry, whether it's asking someone to marry you, whether it's a new baby in the family, or volunteering to teach in kids' church, or a new business venture, the moment God births something in our lives, it begins to take on a life of its own. Because it's a God thing, not just a Brad thing, not just our thing. It's a God thing, which means it has its own life. And it takes on a life of its own. And this is the way life works in general. We shouldn't be surprised. Talking about our own children and losing them in the mall. When they're born, they're so helpless. They're so tiny, this little muffin, and you can hold their little bum right in the palm of your hand, and it feels like it's going to be like this forever. But it's not. Before you know it, they're wriggling around on the floor and they flip over by themselves. Up till now, you had to do all the flipping and turning and picking up, and now they can hold their head by themselves, they can turn over by themselves, and the day they learn to crawl, you put them down and they're gone, right? And then you find them behind the coffee table somewhere. Whoa, whoo! And then pretty soon they leave the room without you, right? And then they leave the house without you. They go to play, and then they go to school, as Shauna says, and then you got to share with teachers. This is a good thing for some families. Our family, we don't like sharing so much. We like it when they come home for Christmas and for the holidays, and it's a sad day when they go back to school because we love our kids. We don't like to share, but it's part of life. And this changes our relationship to our kids, doesn't it? We're everything to them, and then we're most things to them, and then we're something to them, and then we get bumped off the list until they're in their mid-20s again and realize that we're smarter than they thought. Our relationship to them changes, And our role in their lives changes dramatically. And this happens with all God things. As they grow and develop, our relationship to them changes. Our role within the thing that's happening changes. This could be your small group. You had 2 or 3 couples and you started it and it felt really good and really tight, and then people start to join the group and it changes. It could be a painting. Sharon Sargent is our resident artist. When she's painting, she's the creator. But once it's up on the wall, she's the artist. And that painting takes on a life of its own. People can interpret what they will. They can decide what it means for them. They can see things she didn't put in there. There's interpreting that happens. It becomes its own thing. All God things do. That post on Facebook, you meant well, you're commenting to correct a misconception on the internet, and then somebody takes it wrong and this whole thing blows up in your face, and well, I was just trying to help. It takes on a life of its own. When you lead a friend to Christ, they actually grow up and develop their own relationship with God, and it looks different than your own. What's up with that? We want to hold on. We want to hold on to the things we make, we create, and sometimes we forget that it's a God thing. We try to protect what we have. We're afraid of losing what we've been entrusted. And this is what you hear in their voice, right? Why did you do this to us, Jesus? How could you do such a thing? What were you thinking? We were worried sick about you. You can feel the concern. You can feel the mother bear instinct. You can feel them trying to hang on to him. Can't you? Not realizing that this is already bigger than they ever dreamed. When it comes to God things, we're afraid, and I'm in the same boat. We're afraid of trading what we have for what could be. Fundamentally, this is a faith issue. Because we don't believe always, deep down, that what will be, what God has for us in the future, if we let go of this thing and let it be what it's supposed to be, is going to be richer and better than what we have now. We assume this is all we're going to get. This is as good as it gets, and so we better hold on tight. This God thing, it belongs to God, and we are stewards, no more. The whole point is sharing it with the world. We're giving Jesus to the world. We know the day will come, and we don't like it when it arrives. I love this, though, with the story of Jesus. So they spend a day going back to Jerusalem because they're a day away. So they retrace their steps, right? And it takes them a day to just to get back into the city and get their bearings, and he's not along the trail. The panic is rising. An entire day not knowing where your child is. And then they spend another whole day looking through Jerusalem. Not the temple, just the city. Right? They're looking through the markets. They're looking through the old quarter. They're looking through the new quarter. They're thinking, okay, maybe he's found some relative, and they go knock on that door. Nope, not there. And then they wonder, have you ever done this when you lose your child in the mall? Maybe we should split up. Maybe we're just going in circles, and they're going in circles like this. So let's split up, and we'll meet back, over at the well. Yeah. So they do their thing. They fan out, nothing. They try this for an entire day. It's only on the third day they think, maybe he's in the temple. This is why Jesus says, why were you even looking? Was this ever a question of where I'd be? Why wouldn't I be where I'm supposed to be? What I see here in the very human response of Mary and Joseph is a principle, and it's this. When we try too hard to hold on to a God thing, we're often blinded to its purpose. We forget that it's for the world, and we start to think it's about us, and it's not. It's designed to be bigger. It's designed to be shared. God things grow. They change. And it requires change on our part. It requires a change of relationship to that thing God is doing. Our role changes. It happens. Even Jesus grew. Even the Son of God grew. It says so right there. He grew in wisdom and stature and favor with God and man. Wisdom is not defined in the Bible the way we would define it in North America. In the biblical parlance, it kind of means a head, heart, hands coordination. It means life skill, the ability to navigate life with discernment and integrity. That's wisdom. So he's actually learning how to do life better. This is what kids do when they grow up. It's about life skill. Stature, physically, obviously, is one thing, but all God things grow in stature as they grow. They grow in size sometimes, or in shape. They change shape. They grow into maturity. When you plant a church, it starts with a few families, and then it grows in stature. It grows in wisdom, right? And then it grows in maturity. All of these things are part of God things as they grow. And then favor with God and with man. The way I like to define this is there's a growth in my alignment with God and how that comes together with the world that I live in. It's what I think of as a sweet spot. Jesus was growing into the sweet spot where his giftedness and God's great desire for him and the desires of mankind came together into one harmonious package. And when you find that in life, when you find that sweet spot, when you're in alignment with what God wants for you, and it coincides with what the world around you is needing from you, oh, it's a beautiful thing. But to get there, the God thing in you, whether that's your spiritual gift or the assignment or the calling that God's given you, it has to grow. And to grow, we have to learn to let go. Why don't you say that to the person next to you? Phil, say that to the person next to you. Why don't you do that? He's all alone. For my God thing to grow, I gotta let go. I've gotta let go. Sometimes parents, we're the ones keeping our children, we're holding them back. They would probably grow up if we would just let them be what God has designed them to be. There's a second snapshot a little bit later in Jesus' life. Fast forward now another decade or two. It's found in Matthew 12. Jesus is now in full-time ministry, and the crowds are swelling, his reputation's growing. And in one of those situations, Jesus was still talking to the crowd, and his mother and brothers stood outside, wanting to speak to him. Someone told him, your mother and brothers are standing outside, and they're wanting to speak to you. And he replied to him, oh, who is my mother? Who are my brothers? Pointing to his disciples, he said, here are my mother and my brothers. For whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother. That has got to hurt. I would be tempted, Mary, to say, send this message back. Say, I gave birth to you, boy. Right? I am your mother. Let's just get that straight. These people are not your mother. I am your mother. I am speaking to you, right? This is how I would feel. I think she's probably more spiritual than that, but I think that's maybe what she must have been wrestling with on the inside. Can you imagine what it feels like to go, I used to be your everything. I used to hold you like this, and now you're drawing new circles around a new community, and you're saying, these people are family too. Can you feel the power of this moment in Mary's life as she's learning that this God thing is bigger than her role, and the letting go that she has to do as this God thing includes more and more and more people. It's not the same, Joseph, if he's still around. All these new people. I don't even know these people. Are they good people? Are they good for him? Are they good for the mission? I don't know. What about our little family? At this point, it looks very much though like Joseph is no longer on the scene, whether he's passed away or whatever, we don't know. I can imagine Mary thinking, I need you, Jesus. Who are these 12 guys that smell like fish that you keep bringing around? It's not the same. And then there's 72. And then there's 120. At least they can't meet in our living room anymore, but seriously. And then there's crowds of people. And she's in the middle of this crowd. She sends someone to go say, can you just let them know we're out here and all we want to know is, are you coming home for Christmas? Christmas is bigger, Mom. The mission's bigger than you think. There are new circles being drawn, new family, the family of God's circle. And in the family of God's circle, although she will always have a special place in his heart as his biological mother, the God circle, the kingdom circle includes lots of other people, and she's just one of those people in that new kingdom order. John the Baptist experienced this very thing. He was the forerunner of the Son of God. He had a special role to play. He was the voice in the wilderness, calling people to repentance, preparing them for Jesus. And all attention was on him. Not that he sought the spotlight, but all the attention was on him. And the Pharisees and the teachers of the law were firing questions at him. And then all of a sudden, after the baptism of Jesus, he starts to be eclipsed by this Messiah. Even his own disciples go and follow Jesus. And he had the wisdom to say, no, this is good. He must become greater. I must become less. Oh, that's hard to do. Because our desire is to be in the middle of this move of God. And now it's becoming bigger than us. And when it becomes bigger than us, we're not at the middle anymore necessarily. Other people are doing things that are taking off. You know, this small group over here is just really flourishing, and there's some things happening in kids' church, and the Sunday school teacher leads your son to Christ, and whoa, I thought I was going to do that. And then all kinds of things take off, and they're bigger, and they're not revolving around you anymore. It's a good sign, though, when things become bigger than us, isn't it? I've spoken many times of the ministry that Shauna and I had in Winkler. About this time of year, we would have finished our Christmas party with the youth group, which often involved skating or tobogganing or something, a lot like it does here. And we had a particular Christmas party in the Reimers' backyard one year. The Reimers had a huge backyard, and they would make a homemade ice rink, and there was a place for a bonfire, and it was a really cozy spot. And it was a beautiful evening. It wasn't too terribly cold. And the kids showed up in full force, and the leaders were there, and we gathered around a fire, and we were singing to a guitar, singing carols, singing worship songs. Kids started to pray and share, and they're ministering to each other. And I stood there for a few minutes, realizing that I hadn't even contributed anything in a while. So I took a step outside the circle, which was several youth deep, right? There's so many kids and leaders, and just watched it happen without me. And then because I'm a Hubert, I backed up another 20 feet or so and bumped into a tree and climbed up the tree and looked down on this gathering, which was now 20 or 30 minutes without me going, and nobody even noticed. And it was beautiful. It was fantastic. Because I realized that something authentic was happening there that was bigger than me. If your ministry or your idea or whatever it is that God's doing in you never becomes bigger than you, you may want to wonder about, are you hanging on too tight? Now, sometimes when we let God have his way and we let go, things go up and to the right, and they hit the stratosphere, and the fruit is amazing, and people are coming to Christ, or there's all kinds of success, and other times the wheels fall off, and it tanks, and we hit the ground, and we wonder what went wrong. It looked like everything was going up and to the right with Jesus. Mary must have thought, I think it's good that I let go. Look how much bigger than me this has become. I'm so glad that Jesus is rising into this Messiah calling and that he's going to save the world and it's going to be amazing. And then she gets word one night that he's been arrested. Arrested. And then through the city, the ripples of gossip fan out. She's hearing stories of accusations against him, of sedition and all kinds of things that he said that he would never say. And I can just imagine the panic rising up in her going, what is going on? I thought everything was going beautifully. And then the trial escalates and he's sent to the high priest and then he's sent to Pilate, and she may have stumbled into that courtyard thinking, what is happening? God, when are you going to intervene? I don't get it. I let go, and this is what happens. And then the crowd starts to rumble, and Pilate is clearly confused, and they're back and forth and back and forth. He's being interviewed, and by this time he's bruised and battered. She doesn't even recognize his son, and she knows the crowd doesn't recognize his son because they're shouting, crucify, crucify, crucify. And the accusations against him are so baseless. She must have screamed in futility into the crowd and without being heard, you don't know my boy. You don't understand. You don't get it. This isn't the boy I know. The things you're saying don't resonate. This is not him. What are you doing? The incredible, helpless feeling she must have been gripped with. She realized she couldn't control how this thing rippled. She couldn't understand. She couldn't control the public opinion. She couldn't control the gossip. She couldn't control how people ran with his message, went too far with it or didn't go too far, and all of the things that are related to a movement spreading. She couldn't control any of it. The out of control feeling must have been overpowering. Pastors get this. Boy, do we get this. And you do too. You step into a situation and you mean well and you try to add something or add value to a situation and you're misinterpreted and it turns on you. You try to serve in a kind of situation that needs your touch and you take a risk and you're stung. You try to be there for someone and support them and they end up coming around and stabbing you in the back. Remember the promise? Mary got it right at the beginning, day 8, in the temple when they were presenting him to the Lord. Just remember, Mary, Simeon said this, that prophetic man filled with the Spirit, the thoughts of many hearts will be revealed. This is what Jesus does. Remember that word revealed? It's apocalypse. He's a walking apocalypse. He turns things upside down. He overturns apple carts. He provokes people to growth wherever he goes. And so a sword will pierce your own soul too. You're going to get hurt if you follow this Jesus. You will. There's no way of avoiding it. So yes, when you step in to serve, you will get stung from time to time. When you try to intervene or offer help, you will be misinterpreted. You will be stabbed in the back. You will be underappreciated. People will not understand your motives. It's part of the battle. Do you know why? Because since the beginning, Satan has been really, really good at stirring up church people to kill God things. Happened to the prophets. Jesus even said, look, is there well, Jesus didn't say, I think it was Stephen who said it. Is there a prophet that didn't get persecuted in the entire Old Testament? Is there any God things that some church people didn't rise up and try and kill? I don't know why this is, but church people are especially susceptible to being duped into working for the wrong team. And so this is one of the reasons you think the church is the safest place on earth. No, it's not. Because it's the most powerful place on earth. Satan is working here to make sure that God things don't take off. So we need to be very careful how we play with each other. Why church people? Because he knows it will hurt more. That's why. For Satan, it's all about the burn, right? And he knows that when you've got your guard down because you're around good people, that's the perfect time to fire a fiery dart that's going to burn. Can you imagine Mary surrounded by all these church people shouting, "Crucify, crucify," what she felt? Can you imagine the flood of memories? Here he is standing beaten and bruised, hardly able to stand upright, and she remembers holding him in her arms. She remembers that night in the stable with the straw and what she wouldn't trade now for those stupid cattle lowing. She remembers the feeling against her chest as she held him tight. She remembers holding him with her fingers as he took his first steps. She remembers that day in the temple when they left and he was nowhere to be seen and they had to travel 3 days to find him. And now she's thinking, God, what happened? What happened? I thought this was the start of something. And now it's over. This week, I got word on Thursday that Abe Nickel had taken a turn for the worse and that he had been admitted to the Strathmore Hospital. And I didn't know how serious it was, but I sensed in my spirit, I need to go. So I got in my car around lunchtime and drove to Strathmore, found this beautiful country hospital, stepped in through the doors, found their room, and watched their eyes light up. Their eyes lit up. Mine probably fell. I visited Abe several times over the last couple of months. We met, a bunch of us, some of his friends met in their home because he's been housebound for a while, suffering with cancer for months and going downhill steadily. We met to celebrate communion together in their home. Every time I went to visit him, he was skinnier and skinnier and skinnier. I think you know what I mean. You've met with people, you've seen them go downhill. Something interesting was happening with Abe, though, over these months as he went downhill. His spirit was going uphill. The last time I visited in the home, he said, it's just Linda and I most days. They had some visitors, but it was hard because he was so sick. He says, usually it's just Linda and I, but there's a third person in the room. I can feel it almost constantly. I can feel Jesus with us in the room. There's a third person in the room. He wasn't just reciting or rehashing some theological premise. He was living it. So when I stepped into the hospital, it almost took my breath away. His temples were sunken in. His eyes were sticking out. His skin was bruised and scabbed, all the attempts at intravenous and whatnot. And my heart sank for him because I realized, he is in trouble. But my opinion of the whole situation changed drastically as we began to speak. I noticed something. As I was speaking to him, his faith had grown in leaps and bounds since the last time I'd even been with him. Abe's always been a wonderful gentleman, a man of faith. But it was so amazing. We'd be talking together, and I'd say, remember the third person in the room? He's with you now. And he says, oh, I know Jesus is with me. Jesus, Jesus. Lord, and all of a sudden we're praying, and then he's talking to me, and then we're praying, and then he's talking to me. He was completely lucid. But as I was talking to him, I realized the veil between him and heaven is dissolving right now. It's dissolving. It's coming apart. The other side is becoming more real to him than this side. He was lying there, and I shared the verse with him that outwardly we are wasting away, but inwardly we're being renewed day by day. I could see it. And again, he wasn't just reciting scriptures and things to convince himself. He was already experiencing the fullness of Christ. It was fantastic. It was beautiful. Something I said to him, I says, you can't fake this. When everything is stripped away and you're lying there in your bed and you've got nothing left, your entire world is shrunk to this, and your faith is literally glowing out of you. You can't fake that kind of thing. It's just real or it isn't. It was a beautiful, beautiful moment. We prayed together, and then he's praying for me. He's praying for you. Oh. And then there's Linda, standing there. I'm holding her hand and Abe's hand, and we're in this circle together, Jesus in the midst of us. And she's struggling, but she's at peace at the same time. But you can tell she's letting go. She's living what we're talking about here today. The miracle they had prayed for did not happen. They had prayed for a physical healing. It did not happen. In that kind of moment, you discover, is my faith in the God thing, or is it in God himself? If it's in God himself, you're secure, aren't you? It's when we've had our faith in the God thing that we're shaken to our core, and we find it so hard to recover. She'll have a hard road ahead, I'm sure. We need to pray for her. But I was in the middle of describing my series to Abe. I was saying, I'm preaching about Mary, and this Sunday I'm going to talk about letting go, and I'd really love it if I could share. Yes, he said. Well, I was wondering if I could share the story. Yes. Then I will. We all come to moments when our dreams die. And if we haven't already, that's the time to let go of the dream and put our faith in God. Because it was his anyway. And, as we'll find out tomorrow, it's not over till he says it's over anyway. I want to ask you today, where are you with your calling, your God thing? Are you still waiting for your Gabriel? Waiting for the message, for the clarity, for the mission? Are you waiting for your Joseph to come around because he hasn't quite got the picture yet? Maybe you haven't found your Elizabeth who's there for the duration, who can share that part of the journey with you and lend that needed support. Maybe you're finding it difficult, like Mary, to weather the setbacks that are discouraging you from what you thought God laid on your heart. Maybe you're finding it so hard to let go and let God. John 14:12 says that unless a seed falls to the ground and dies, it remains a single seed. But if it dies, it can produce many seeds. I have a feeling that the impact of Abe's life will be multiplied through his death. Even though we'll miss him terribly. Here we are, we're talking about it now, and it's inspiring you, isn't it? Let's pray. Jesus, thank you so much that you are always with us. Thank you that we never, never walk alone. Thank you that you're faithful. Thank you that you call us into an amazing partnership with you, that you provide us with Josephs and Elizabeths, that you send Gabriels, and that you orchestrate moments in ministry where we are forced to confront the bigness of what you're doing and have to let go and let you take things where they need to go. Thank you that even when things don't go the way we'd hoped, you are God, that you are faithful, and that we are never alone. In this moment, too, I pray for Linda, and I pray for Leona, again, as they face their future without their loved ones. I pray that you would breathe hope that only you can into their spirit. In your name we pray. Amen.